All right, let me dive right into it. There's just so much to talk about. And thanks, Jeff, for walking us through the big picture. What I'd like to do is spend just a few minutes giving you some context around the product and the strategy that we're pursuing with Meteor and with the different software that we've been building. And I want to do that mostly to give you the lay of the land so that as we spend most of the day asking questions, you'll have that picture in your mind, and hopefully that will guide some of the conversation and help us get some great information from you. So my name's Matt. For those who haven't met me, I run product and engineering here at MDG. And you know, there's, as Jeff said, the big theme for us has been, when we last met, Meteor was still anchored to a lot of homebrewed technology, a lot of things that were developed early on in the course of the framework. And above all else, my priority since we last met 5 months ago has been charting a course toward a platform based, as Jeff said, on standards, on extensibility, on modularity, and I think above all, on the needs of larger teams building more complex apps. It's the thing we heard more than anything else from all of you late last year. And I hope you'll see that that's been the anchor behind virtually everything we've done up to this point and what we're planning to do going into the future. Here at Meteor, we think of our work as divided into 3 areas, and we're going to structure the day around these areas. So we've got the framework, the code in Meteor/Meteor for the most part. That's the stuff that you use to build an app. It includes not just Meteor Core, but also the whole ecosystem of Atmosphere packages, and now starting with 1.3, really the whole ecosystem of NPM packages. It includes the view layers, the build tooling. So all of those considerations that go into building an app in JavaScript. Data, that's Apollo. So that's the piece of the Meteor stack that's all about moving data between the cloud and the client. And the big thing with Apollo, of course, is figuring out a way to separate that out into an independent set of tools and components that you can use in lots of different settings with more data sources with existing applications. And then the runtime, well, that's Galaxy, right? That's the what you need to run your app in the cloud, hands-off, backed by Meteor Development Group for 24/7, 365 support all around the world. So that's how we think about it. And each of these 3 has a product manager here at Meteor who can work closely with you and is eager to work closely with you to understand the direction that all of this should go. So if I can take just a moment, for framework, that's Zoltan. Zol, I'm sure, has met almost everyone here. For Apollo, that's me. And then for runtime, Galaxy, and our cloud services, that's Rohit in the back. So a lot of the core developers working on these areas are here as well. And as Jeff said, it's an all-access day, so we're very happy to learn from you and to tell you anything we can about what we're thinking. But beyond today, we're really eager to keep that conversation going. And these are some of the people that can drive that. So framework, let's start there, and I'll just walk through each of them briefly. As Jeff said, this is without any shame or qualification. We are focused on the needs of teams of professionals building large applications. And not to put too fine a point on it, but that's you. So as Jeff said, there was a lot of discussion in the Meteor forums over the last few months as people realized that they'd be writing a few extra lines of code, as people realized that there would be some transitions, that we weren't going to isolate the app that you'd built and never have to touch that for 2 years going forward. But I think these changes are all really positive changes for the kinds of apps that you told us about and the kinds of challenges that you told us about. So there's a ton of stuff in here. New native mobile containers, for example, so you can do reliable hot code push bypassing the Apple App Store. We've got some tunable performance parameters for those of you using live data in certain settings where you want to be able to adjust how reactivity works or make some trade-offs on performance. Lots of updates across the stack. But the big news in 1.3 is 3 features that all orbit each other. And that's ES 2015 modules, an integration with NPM, and testing finally moved into core. So I think modules are the start of the story. They pave the way for a number of important things. Better application structure, of course, that you can isolate different components, different pieces of code, the end of a lot of your application globals, and instead a shift toward an explicit set of imports so that you can structure that app. And as your team grows, you're not stepping on each other's toes. With that, we've solved the load order problem, right? So instead of depending on this bizarre, vaguely alphabetical way of organizing your code, you just say what order you want everything to happen in. Classic example of something that takes one more minute to get used to as you're building the app, but pays massive dividends as you go forward. Modules crack open the door for testing, right? So we now have both unit and integration tests in Meteor 1.3 built around the idea of separable modules, which means we can run tests in isolation. It's a really great story. And they also mean we can start to move away from many of the wrapper packages and some of the cumbersome gaskets and integrations between the Meteor core stack and the larger JavaScript ecosystem. And that realization prompted us to do a big effort to do NPM integration right. And that's the ability to type npm install and drop most any client-side or server-side JavaScript code directly provided by the upstream author of that code into your Meteor application. We're really excited about that because it obviously paves the way for tighter integration with JavaScript, but beyond that, it gives a clearer picture, I think, of how a modern Meteor app is going to be built and where you're going to pull that code from. And I think the best example of that, excuse me, is the view layer. So when we spoke in November, we spent a fair bit of time talking about the evolution of the view layer, the rise of, as Jeff said, React from Facebook, Angular from Google, what that meant for how we might want to build applications, the appeal of being able to use these systems that were built from a component-first perspective. And what we found is not just the layers themselves, so not just React Core, but so much of the ecosystems around those view layers live in NPM. So NPM install and support for modules gives us a really nice path forward where we can start to emphasize React and Angular as the preferred view layers going forward. And we can build on that whole ecosystem of software that's available in NPM. So all four are supported today. You'll find a chapter in the guide about Blaze, about React, about Angular. But we do think the future is this direction. And our commitment here, what we heard very clearly from you last time and what we've heard from our users in the months since then, is that there needs to be a managed transition. There needs to be a clear path forward. But that path should end with the React and with the Angular ecosystems. And what we're going to be watching very carefully is for the pace of maturity of those ecosystems. So not just the core capabilities of, say, Angular 2 and React, but what is out there in terms of everything from form support to user accounts components to all of the things that we've built up over the past few years in the Blaze ecosystem. And as we see that mature, we'll start to push more and more guidance into the guide and into other settings for how to make that transition. And speaking of the guide, this is perhaps my favorite feature in all of Meteor 1.3. We have committed to documenting not just the technical details of how the APIs in Meteor work, but also the bigger story about how to build an app with that stuff. A lot of opinions, a lot of decisions that previously lived with each developer in each company, we've rolled into a comprehensive, complete story from soup to nuts, from how to structure your code and what you should name the files and where they should go, to how you should build components, to how the form should look, to how all of these pieces should pull together. And it's not just about Meteor Core. A lot of what's in here, I'd say the majority of what's in here, is about how to integrate with other parts of the JavaScript ecosystem. Parts that are in Atmosphere and increasingly parts that are coming directly from NPM. So our commitment on the guide is to, with each Meteor version going forward, provide you with a very clear and straightforward answer to the kinds of questions you're going to bump into as you're writing an app. And included in that is a set of clear answers to how to get there. So the guide includes a whole chapter on migrating to Meteor 1.3, a thankfully short section on breaking changes, mostly around some mobile work that we had to do. We are very much tied to some decisions made by Cordova and some of the other tech where they're using on mobile. But a much longer section after that about how to get to modules, one file at a time, one piece of your app at a time, how to get to other view layers, and so on and so forth. So speaking of 1.3, if I can, I'd love to invite Lucas Hansen up for just a moment. Lucas is from Qualia, and we just wanted to talk for a moment about your experience upgrading to Meteor 1.3. So welcome, Lucas.
Hello.
So tell us about what's Qualia?
So we build software for title companies. So when you buy or sell a house, there's something the lender usually hires something called a title company, which manages a lot of the details of the transaction. So they hold all of the money in escrow, the full loan value of the house, and distribute it to everyone. They generate hundreds of legal documents. They do research into the history of the house. They record things with the local government. They do lots and lots of stuff. So what we do is we build the main piece of software that they use all day long. So our customers were literally using our application like 12 hours a day.
And tell us about, so you were on Meteor, you made the upgrade to 1.3. What drove that for you? What was the thinking behind wanting those new features?
So for us, it was very, very painless. I think like the only thing that we had to deal with is there was some like iron router bug that only came up in Meteor 1.3, but that took all of like 10 minutes to fix. So I think our entire migration was like 20 minutes or a half hour, maybe. I think a lot of that is like the way that Meteor does release candidates. So there are lots of really nice features that everyone wants to use really early on. So you have the entire community testing out all the release candidates, and all the bugs get hammered out. I remember, I tested out like the first or second one, and there were some issues. But by the time like the actual version was out, there were no issues. The most exciting things for us were, I feel like over the past several months, Meteor has been really, really good about engaging with the community. So there were lots of pull requests that increase like performance in different ways and add features that got merged into 1.3. And those were some of the things that were most exciting for me. I also, this is a small thing, I really like being able to pipe things into Meteor Shell. We have a lot of like command line tool automation, and like it's much easier now that you can do that. And then of course, the NPM packages and modules are really, really nice as well.
Great, thank you. We didn't rehearse that, but I'm so excited to hear you talk about that RC train and the pull requests that came through. And actually, credit if I can, Ben Newman's here today. Ben's the lead developer on the Meteor framework, and was really the person behind this, not just transition to modules, but a force for doing so many more RCs and for doing more frequent releases leading up to Meteor 1.3. So here's just a little bit of what's coming. I'm sorry. Oh, that's me. This is Ben. So to that point, what's coming next for Meteor? The big thing for me, the theme that I am excited about is up to this point, we've had a series of big monolithic releases. 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. In fact, if you go further back, Meteor 0.6.2 was a big release, right? Or I made that version up. But we want to get a little bit away from that. And instead, we want to do two things. One is we want to decouple the Meteor core into separable parts that we can manage independently, that we can release independently. A big reason for that is we want to get you stuff faster. And I think one of the critiques of Meteor up to 1.3 has been there's a long dwell time between a pull request and a release that includes that pull request. We've heard from people over and over again that what would be very helpful is a faster path from contributed code in the Meteor ecosystem to software that you're running in your apps. So we're looking for ways to do that. The other thing we want to do here is just up the frequency of those releases. So you've already seen that happening with Meteor, not just 1.3, but immediately after 1.3.1, 1.3.2. And we're going to continue to do that. So you're going to see far more frequent releases. You're going to see more of a effort to use those as a chance for developers on the leading edge of the project to try some things out, to get those features out into the field, and then to roll them out across the larger app ecosystem as those things stabilize. This also ties in with another point that's come up. We want to get closer to the open source community. And we see breaking out these packages into independent projects, so to speak, as a big opportunity for us to bring more developers into the project, for those developers to focus on a particular area of the stack, and again, for us to be able to take those improvements and fold them into the bigger Meteor picture on a much faster basis. So one request I have of everyone here, of course, many of you are developers or have a development team back at the office. We're very eager to have those collaborators. And if there's an area where you feel like collaboration would be easier if only ... we want to know what's in the rest of that sentence. And we want to emphasize that work above our own feature development. So what's next on framework? Well, the reorganization and refactoring of Meteor Core is the thing you're going to see us spending the most time on. We're going to focus on pull requests. We're going to focus on ways to modularize all of that, break it out into separate repositories. You've seen some of that happening already, but you'll see more and more of that over the coming months. That way allows us to complete the transition to NPM. So we have a whole bunch of questions about some of that are going to come in the Meteor section that Zol's going to lead. But we are committed, now that we have support for modules and we have support for NPM install and core, to migrate to a NPM first architecture where the packages, whether they're built by the Meteor core team here or whether they're contributed by other parts of the community, are all part of that larger NPM ecosystem. So over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 months, you'll see a series of changes, both in terms of how the architecture works and in terms of where that code is coming from. And what we want to make sure we get right as we work with you is that transition is very smooth and clean. We have some ideas about that, but we also have a lot of questions. And as I said, with that comes community contributors. So we see the decoupling of core and the move toward NPM-based tooling for managing those packages as the keys that unlock a higher frequency of community contributions. And what you'll see from us is a shift in our emphasis from first-party code, so to speak, to using our time to help guide and improve those sorts of incoming contributions to the project. And there's one other that I just think is important enough to note as much of a detail as it is. 2 major updates to technologies that we depend on. Mongo 3.2, of course, which is the first Mongo release that recommends their new storage engine, which has all kinds of benefits for performance and scaling of your app. And then, of course, Node 4, Node 6. We'll make some decisions about the exact versions, but moving to a modern version of Node with LTS behind it. OK, so that's framework. Let's talk about data. Yeah, of course, Luis.
When is next? Do you have a time?
We don't have a time frame for those exact changes. I think some of that will come out as Zol talks about it, though, because we have some decisions to make, for example, how much to prioritize the Mongo 3.2 and the Node updates and some dependencies to work out. But a big part of today is figuring out the answer to that so that we can put an order on it.
And does the shift in emphasis mean that there's going to be less, will MDG be focusing less on actually putting out, so you mentioned less on putting out first-party code and more on kind of shepherding that. Does that mean MDG is kind of divesting a bit from investments in the framework?
No, not at all. In fact, a lot of that is what I'm about to talk about with Apollo and with data. So you'll see some refactoring or some reordering in the taxonomy of what all adds up to Meteor. You will see more and more interest from us in where we see great technology that's out there, and the view layers are I think, a good example of this, but not the only one. An inclination to integrate and to pull those in just the right way, rather than build something that sits in parallel to them.
Yeah, can I just underline that?
Yeah.
What we're not going to do is duplicate other stuff that's going on in JavaScript. So we're going to look at our partners, meaning NPM, Angular, React. We're going to make sure that we don't make duplicative investments against them, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
that's the main area where you will see us doing this. So we'll keep an eye on, for example, JavaScript tooling as that develops. Like, should we be working closely with Webpack? Should we be working closely with the new, build stuff that Angular is working on? we're just going to look at everything through that lens of saying, are we adding incremental value to the JavaScript ecosystem, or would a partnership or a collaboration be better, if that makes sense?
And just to hit the point once more, the whole idea of today for us, quite selfishly, is to ask lots of questions so that we can make the best choices about how, when, and what order we do those things. And so Zol and others are going to have a lot that we want to learn from based on your experience and your intuition about where the platform should go. So yeah, let's talk about data. So this is, as Jeff said, this is extracting a lot of the core value from that monolithic Meteor box into something that is incrementally adoptable, something that fits into more settings, more environments, more types of applications, something that can connect to more sources of data. And that's what we call Apollo. We could not be more excited about this. We just launched a technical preview of Apollo last week at apollostack.com. And actually, if I can just take a moment, Sashko here in the back, if you can raise your hand, is leading the charge on Apollo. Others as well are working on that. I think we have 4 people now full-time on the engineering side on just what's inside the Apollo stack, plus many, many contributors from other organizations and developers. So this is something you're going to see a lot of investment behind over the coming weeks and months. There's a lot to do, but we're pretty excited already about where we are so far. And I just want to touch on a little bit of how we see this fitting into the picture and what that means for those of you using Meteor, but with an eye toward other data sources or other ways to structure how the data moves in your app. So we'll get to the tech in a moment, but the other thing I want to hit on is that structurally, we've learned a lot about building the data system in Meteor that we're applying to Apollo. So one thing, for example, you're going to see is an early focus from us, not just on the Meteor ecosystem with Apollo, but on attracting developers who are using other technologies. Perhaps they're using a bare Angular app on top of Rails, for example. I don't want you to be alarmed by that. The reason we're doing that is we see a broader developer base as being vital to ensuring Apollo's success. We see it as a stronger way to build that technology up from the ground up first. We see it as a way to ensure that we're building for the needs of every developer and for the needs of every kind of application environment rather than focusing too early on a specific requirement. So we're going to talk a lot later this afternoon about bringing Apollo into your Meteor 1.3 apps and what we can do to accelerate that transition. But I just want you to see this as a big plus for this is, in some sense, how we're going to expand the Meteor ecosystem, right? And as people build applications on top of Apollo, it's an opportunity to bring other parts of the framework that we just talked about into the picture as well. We're also going to be doing a lot of work to coordinate with other developers and other organizations. So Apollo is based on GraphQL, a query language that came out of Facebook. We'll talk about that in just a moment. We're working very closely with them on how our efforts align with theirs. In fact, one of the lead developers on the GraphQL project at Facebook will be here as it happens later today. And if you see me duck out for a few minutes, that's why. We're building really strong bridges to that community of developers and to the people who are behind some of these technologies from day one with Apollo. So all that said, it came from Meteor and it's built for Meteor. So I just want to talk about a few of the benefits for the Meteor developer, for the Meteor ecosystem with Apollo. And the first one, is multiple data sources. So from day one, Apollo supports SQL, MongoDB, REST APIs as a data source. We'll talk about some of the other sources of data, software packages, other databases, and so forth. But really from day one, the focus here is on making sure that you can pull data from wherever it lives or wherever you want it to live based on the needs of your application. Another big one, and this is something we heard over and over again from you, is reactivity is optional in Apollo rather than mandatory. That has great implications for both performance, but also for the kinds of UIs that you can quickly build. I think something that we heard a lot about was oddly enough, how challenging it is to make something in Meteor that doesn't move around all the time or doesn't update as your data is changing. With Apollo, that's going to be very natural, and that's going to be something that you can mix and match with parts of your app that are live updating and parts of your app that are more of a static presentation to the user. In part because of that choice about reactivity, and in part because of some technical decisions we're making in terms of the server architecture for Apollo, it is built to be scalable from day one. Scalable in the sense that you'll be able to predictably add resources to your backend services as your load grows. Scalable in the sense that you'll be able to predict and measure the performance of your clients as the complexity of what's inside the client grows. So this is something, again, we've heard over and over about Meteor's data layer, incredibly powerful, a wee bit confusing to understand. You'll see an emphasis here on predictable, on something you can model, on something you can plan around for scaling. And finally, it's built for microservices. So Apollo is built for a world where we expect that, at least over time, if not initially, you're going to build your apps not as one monolithic backend, but as a set of those backends that each have their own responsibility, that each have their own particular role in the system. We also expect that you'll build apps that are based on top of existing backends, existing investments in microservices, which may not even be written in JavaScript, right? Which may be part of an existing application. So we've designed Apollo from the start to be something that you would bring into an environment like that, rather than something where you have to go through contortions to integrate with your new client, with your new Meteor application. And a picture to show you sort of our thinking behind this, and again, we'll get into a lot more of the details as we get into the afternoon session about Apollo. Here's what happens when you've got a bunch of smart clients written in JavaScript talking to a bunch of microservices. There's an n-squared problem, or an m by n problem, where every one of your clients has to talk to every one of your data sources. And we're seeing the effects of this in the Meteor ecosystem, and we hear about it from people with applications. I mean, we spoke about this on the phone, I guess, a month ago, where Lexmark has a whole set of existing data sources and microservices in their environment. And when you want to build a new client on top of that, you're forced to look at every one of them and contend with the particular technology choices that were made there and the limitations on how to use them. The way to think about Apollo is a layer that fits between those sources of data, whether they're microservices with code you wrote, services from a third party, databases themselves, and your clients. So it brokers and manages the flow of data back and forth between them. And a good shorthand, I think, is think of all the great user experience you get with Meteor, where you can declare the kind of data that your client needs. You can write a query on the client, but you get an architecture that nicely separates each piece of that stack. So you're not entangling that declaration with exactly how your Meteor backend is built. We'll talk a lot more about this in the afternoon, but I just want to give you a picture of where this goes. Here's our plan. So Apollo and DDP sit very nicely next to each other. And so the transition, we are nowhere near, by the way, I should say, recommending a change from Meteor's live data stack to Apollo. Apollo is the future, but the future is not here today. For certain situations, for certain workloads, for certain applications, it is something, though, that you can start to use. And we have begun working with customers and with partners that have apps that fit into this category. The way it'll work is you can bring Apollo in one piece at a time, one component at a time, one backend service at a time, one query at a time. And over the course of that transition, you'll just see the Apollo box grow and the DDP box shrink, like a lot of transitions, until finally you can move your whole application or your whole client onto the Apollo stack. That's going to be a long time from now, so I don't want everybody to run home thinking I've got to make this change tomorrow. But I do want us to start thinking about what might a transition look like and what can we do to help you get that first piece into your app and also make the succession very, very smooth and straightforward as you go from 1 to 2 to 10 to 100 components in your app. Yes, sir.
So I think that a key piece that you can do is design it so that you can handle data from one centralized place. so that, right now, we did a test run on this recently. If you want to do one of the most basic, sort of data things that you would ever want to do in an app, which is, take a piece of data from a form, stick it in a database, and take it back out again. I counted. You end up putting code in 10 different places.
Yeah, it's nuts.
In the Meteor app.
Yeah.
From migration to PubSub to schema and that's both really difficult, in terms of the time it takes to do it, and it becomes unmanageable when you get a lot of those to maintain. The actual logic of what's needed there, which, this is something that gets done again and again and again, is really only 3 or 4 pieces of information, logical information, that can actually get stated on one line.
Yeah.
And so that's my suggestion is, as you overhaul the data, make it so that you can just specify the minimum logical information needed instead of having to write all that code in all those different places.
I think that's exactly right. I think of this as decoupling the data layer in some sense, much like we can decouple the different packages that go into Meteor Core. It's one of the big insights that comes out of this architecture. And well, in fact, that's a perfect lead-in. James Baxley is here from New Spring Church. Let me welcome James up. So James is James, you have a whole team, a Meteor app in production, and you've been using GraphQL and most recently Apollo to manage exactly some of the problems that you brought up. So why don't you tell us what's New Spring Church and what's the software stack like to start with?
Yeah, so we are a church in South Carolina with 18 campuses all over the course of the state. Average attendance from 30 to 40,000 people each Sunday, and an online presence of around 3 to 4 million a year. So we're a growing organization that for a while has seen exponential growth, and it's been a lot of fun with that. So our existing app, when I came on and started working, I've been here for about 2.5 years now. We have a lot of various systems. As we started to grow as an organization, we outsourced most of our systems because that was what we had to do. So we had third-party church management systems. We had, MailChimp for emails. We had WordPress for a little while, and we moved to Expression Engine as a CMS platform. So we had this vast network of all these ways that data was handled. And a big push that I've been kind of championing and that we just recently launched is we want to have a unified account system for all of our people. So if their donations and giving data is in one system, but their family history is in another system, and their email subscriptions in another, it makes it very confusing for them to be able to interact with our organization, and we want to put a clear, friendly face on that. And so where GraphQL has been incredible is in that exactly, is we've been able to co-locate our data. It's where, as a developer, I only have to worry about it at one spot. Whether I'm the back-end systems developer who's writing out how you get all this data and how it's related. So if you like an article that we posted to Facebook and you've linked your account, and we know that at the same time you've been reading articles on the same topic on our own system, we're going to be able to know that and start to be able to serve you better in that. And then if you're a front-end developer, you want to have a great component and you want to focus on making your UI friendly and really there to serve people. And so instead of worrying about what data is available to me or what new systems do I have to ask from the systems team, if I have my list of what's available to me, I can focus in on serving that client as the end user. And it's been excellent for us so far.
James is going to do a demo this afternoon to show you exactly what that's like from a development perspective. I think you're going to like it. You've also been contributing code to the Apollo project. Maybe you could just say a word about, what do you think about Apollo so far? It's obviously very early, but what are your thoughts and where do you see the New Spring Church development team going with it?
I think it's great. I mean, we plan on moving everything to Apollo, and we've started to move some of our existing projects. NPM linking the projects that we're actively developing on. Our existing app that's in production, we kind of in-house wrote what Apollo is becoming now. In a very collaborative and hacked-on way that you do the first time that you explore a new technology. And so it's been great to kind of depreciate our large batch query strings and reactive components, because we use React as our view layer. Originally transitioned that to a React mixin that one of our engineers wrote, and then now being able to write it with React Apollo, it's condensed our code lines. It's allowed us to share a lot more code, to ship smaller bundles to the client, and with kind of the query diffing, we're able to make faster, more responsive apps. So it's been great. I see our future is highly dependent on Apollo as we roll out apps that need more reactivity, like a chat app, or being able to go through a course together with people all over the world. Apollo is going to be critical for how we do that, so we're really excited to contribute to it.
Great. Thank you.
Cool. You bet.
So I mean, that to me sums it up. So many people we've talked to have apps that don't live alone in the world. They live right next to other apps. They live next to other places that data lives. There's this really strong desire, this need to create new apps, new clients that draw from all of that. And so that's been, for us, really the focus. And I think you'll see as we show off some of what we've done in the afternoon and then hear all of our questions where this is headed. We're very, very excited to bring you with us and to move the platform forward in that way. So last, let me talk about runtime and Galaxy. And this one's just been off the rocker. This is, Jeff mentioned this explosive growth. I think we had, 15 or 20 Galaxy customers if we counted liberally when we last spoke. It had just gone into the market. I had just gotten back from reInvent in Las Vegas to talk about building Galaxy on top of Amazon's infrastructure. And in the last few months, it's really been an incredible sequence of bringing more and more kinds of companies, more and more applications onto the platform. The big story, and as with many things, this came out of conversations with you, has been a shift from the early versions of Galaxy that were bundled as a package, so to speak, to, here's our theme for the day, I suppose, more modular, more of an incremental way to use it. And so where we are now is a single Galaxy product for developers and for projects at all scales. So Galaxy supports a single program running on a compact container in development mode, and then smoothly scaling that up all the way to, we have customers on dozens of containers running much larger memory footprints in a highly available configuration across multiple availability zones. That's a smooth path from one to the other. And so for us, this has been about identifying the pain points and the friction points along that sequence of steps that you take as an app evolves from that first development into production and scaling, and trying to put all the pieces in place for you. We're going to have a lot of questions with Galaxy. As a cloud service, it's a little bit different from the open source projects I've been talking about, because here we can think really fine-grained about which of these features would be most helpful, in what order. How would you take advantage of something like this? And so I think you'll see as Rohit leads that conversation, a whole bunch of opportunities here that let us serve your needs better and serve your applications faster as you're developing them. But I do want to highlight a few things that I think we're quite confident are going to come in the short term. So one that I'm very excited about is a zero configuration integration with Let's Encrypt, so that every deployed app onto Galaxy from the start is properly organized around encryption on the wire. This is something that I think is obviously a convenience, but also, frankly, just a more responsible way to run these apps. So we've built this integration where, again, with zero management for the majority of your applications, take no action and everything's set. Of course, you can upload custom certificates for those of you who want EV certs or some other reason to manage that. But for many of you, or for many of the apps that you're running as development or staging apps, you won't need to go through that process. We've been working on automatic predictable fault tolerance. So Galaxy from day one was built in a highly available configuration, meaning that if you were running your application, it would be spread across multiple availability zones in Amazon. What we've added to that is less configuration, less thinking about it, and more prescriptive guidance about not just how to get your app to a scale or a fault-tolerant state, but also to understand the performance and the scaling capability of that app in a degraded mode. So we've worked on some guidance around, for example, understanding enough of the internals of Galaxy so that you can predict the effect of a data center failure or an AZ outage on the performance of your app. And I think you'll see that by showing how it works inside, there's a clear path forward for you and for those of you that need not just fault tolerance, but fault tolerance while your customers are actually using the thing at scale. We've got, I think, something really cool here around prepaid discounted containers. You can think of this as like the reserved instance equivalent for Galaxy. We've been exploring this first with partners who want to be able to develop applications for their customers and then turn around and deploy those and offer essentially a white glove service where the customer who asked for the app doesn't need to worry about how that app's running. This gives our partners a way to not just make some money, but also manage expenses and predict expenses a little bit better. We have some questions about this, but we'd be very excited to work with you to see what makes the most sense in terms of the details. And as Jeff said, probably the biggest story here, multi-region, coming very soon, both for the Europe and for the Asia regions. This is, I think it's fair to say, the #1 request from customers and from potential customers for Galaxy. We found a way to do it. And everything in Galaxy, the fault tolerance, the scaling, the zero configuration SSL, all of that will be available in the US region, the Europe region, and the Asia region. One smooth process for your apps. Support's another big thing in Galaxy. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
SSL is that to the load balancer or to the actual routine?
There's a couple hops in there, and we can talk about what would be most useful for you in terms of encryption inside the environment. Yeah. So support's a big part of the Galaxy story because by creating the framework and the runtime, we can offer an end-to-end answer to how am I going to keep this application running and who am I going to call when there's a problem. So we've invested in all the stages of, I think, a comprehensive support solution for applications running on Galaxy. There is a much larger knowledge base. We really had none of this when we last met, but we heard over and over again how helpful it would be to have more self-service information, not just about how do I do X, but what's going on inside here so that I can think about it and plan out the way I'm going to use Galaxy. Of course, we have a variety of support options for Galaxy, ranging from a $99 a month priority support option that's been very popular, all the way up through 24/7, 365, worldwide 15-minute turnaround time for your whole investment in your JavaScript app. And then layered on top of that, of course, is the developer subscription that many of you have been using. This allows us to include not just support for your application while it's running, but also let's look inside that app. Let's talk about your scaling, your architecture, your security questions, and a comprehensive look at the whole picture rather than the finger pointing from the vendor that's running it to the vendor that helped you wrote it to the vendor that may have suggested the technology in the first place but then walked away. There's one phone number to call here in this picture, and we're very proud to be able to offer that for customers that are building big investments in their applications on JavaScript. Okay, so as I said, we have a million questions for you. I've talked long enough. I think Jeff's talked long enough. It's time for us to learn and to hear your thoughts. What I do want to show is just, for us, these all fit together. The theme, as you've heard, is modularity. The theme is building for the needs of the professionals that are building great applications. The theme is extracting as much as we can from the big box that used to be called Meteor so that it can be used in different settings with different data sources, with different apps that you already have in the field. The world's a complicated place, and we want Meteor to be something that you can thread into each part of your application investment, into each part of your strategy for using software going forward, rather than be an island unto itself. And so that'll be what's underlying so many of the questions we're asking you and so much of what we're going to focus on building going forward. And it's important to us to hear this stuff. I thought maybe I'd close by reviewing what we talked about last time. And I've touched on a lot of this over the last half hour, but maybe I can just put this up. When we met and we asked you about the different parts of the stack and what was most important, what we landed on and what we said we would be shipping between late 2015 and the first quarter of 2016 was Galaxy in a more modular way, a developer edition of Galaxy that you could use container by container. We talked about our plans for the view layer and a move toward React. And of course, we talked about modules and testing and the improvements for mobile and the need for opinionated guidance on how to build your app. And with the exception of templates on React, which turned out to just be wrong, and we had a very vibrant discussion in the community about this that led us to, I think, a much better place, we did every one of these things. And I say that not because I want you to say thanks, but because I want to show how committed we are to hearing from you, to turning around, to thinking about what it takes to put that into practice, and then delivering that on a schedule.
Thanks.
So, well, thank you. So I look forward to doing this again in 6 months. I suppose there should be one more bullet here, which is we agreed to do this again in 6 months, and here we are with many more of you this time. So we're going to listen carefully. We're going to take a lot of notes. I also hope that you can all learn from each other, because there's a lot of great discussion that can happen once we start posing these questions about what are you bumping into. And just to emphasize what Jeff said, this is a safe space for a day. No technology is perfect. None of this stuff is ever finished. So please don't be shy when something sucks. Just tell us, right? And don't be shy saying, I'm having a real problem with this, or I really wish this were different. That's what's most valuable for us to hear. That's what helps us make good decisions about where the project should go, where the platform should go. That's why so many of the core developers, the PMs, myself, Jeff, Nick, are all here to listen to that and to reflect on that so that we can bake it into what we do in the future. So thank you again for coming, for sharing all of this, and for building your companies and your projects on Meteor.